So when you worked in the White House, how do you find living in DC? How did they react to that lifestyle?
Well, toward me, I was straight. I had not come out yet.
Oh.
So I was, what we like to say back home, I was at that point in my life fat, straight, and Republican. I mean, now I'm just a little less fat and way gayer and less Republican.
I mean, how did you introduce yourself to everybody you met this weekend?
Appalachian homo.
Yeah.
I'm a proud Appalachian homo. I am a Kentucky boy through and through. Always will be. I'll die in Kentucky.
And when people asked you what you did for a living, what did you say?
Fundraising whore.
Yeah. Well, and I wore this for you today. In hose we trust.
In hose we trust. Yeah. Fundraising's not easy. This is hard.
No, it is.
Nobody
very
grows up
hard.
saying, "I want to raise
I've got
money."
to tell you, my hat is off to you.
Well, look what you've been doing.
Yeah, but the pros are stepping in now.
Yeah.
I feel like we
so.
just got to that place where the bouillabaisse became a secret sauce. Like now you have to pay for the recipe because you can't get this.
Well, I
you
love
can't get
it.
this on the shelf.
I feel like, we all want to feel like we have purpose. And this makes me feel like I have purpose, like knowing that I have a skill set where I could help. When I first started my firm, I had the opposite strategy. I was like doing too much for too many people. Like everybody needed help all the time. And I'm like, oh my Lord, I felt like Mother Teresa. And I'm like, okay, I got to dial it back. So now I'm being very selective. I can only take on one thing at a time here if I really want to have impact. And so my strategy has shifted, my business model shifted a little bit, and I'm having a lot more fun with it. Like taking on, working with you all, I only have one or two other clients, which is really nice. So that I could focus on really growing something. But back to your question about DC, everybody in DC is gay. There's so many gay people
Were you surprised? We, not to drop names, but we had lunch with some GOP power hitters yesterday and dinner. Were you surprised how much your views aligned?
Yeah, I mean, not surprised, no, because I've been in this for so long. I actually know politics. I've studied it my whole life. It's a chess game. And really good, effective. I always brag about my congressman back home, Morgan McGarvey, who I support in a big way. And it's because he's effective. He doesn't hate Republicans. He doesn't hate people. He does a good job being a public servant. Like he's a good politician. Like he works with people. Like it doesn't matter. What I get frustrated is when these politicians think it's okay to yell and scream at each other and write them off, or like the Marjorie Taylor Greens.
Right.
And no, that's not acceptable behavior. I mean, we don't elect you to go and be polarizing. Right. And my way's the highway and down with you. And that's not politics to me. And so I know that I'm unique in this. I mean, you all are similar when we have conversations. Talk issues. This isn't we're one country. Like we're not supposed to go at each other like that. And empathy is important in politics.
Right.
Everybody's timing is different. Everybody is learning differently. Everybody experiences differently. I think back when I was closeted, we talked about this, my evolution. So even if I just internalize it and look at my own story, there's been so many chapters in my life that have brought me along.
Right.
I may be one way on an issue today that I was not 10 years ago.
And you recognize those.
100%. And I know parties change. Leadership changes. And, now I'm not a paid political operative. I always put that into perspective too. Paid political operatives on both sides are going to have their own perspective because they're paid.
Right.
That's their livelihood. I don't get paid. I'm a citizen. I'm a cheerleader. I just want good shit to happen to as many good people as possible. Right.
Right.
And so for me, talking politics should never turn into a bloodbath.
Mm-hmm.
Because it should be progress. I should take away something. You should take away something. You should learn something from me. I should learn something from you. And look, I'm a proud Kentucky Democrat. I'll tell you, you ask 10 Kentucky Democrats what Kentucky Democrat means, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Mm-hmm.
Same goes for the Republican Party. Guarantee it. So I just put things into perspective when I talk to people and try to make light of it. and then just focus on like getting it done, you know, because every issue, you know, I'm not going to change somebody's opinion who hates gay people.
Right.
But I'm also not going to hate that person for it. That person has their own story, their own journey, and their own reasoning on why they're so insecure about hating gay people. And that doesn't hurt me. It may hurt my feelings, but
well, and when you said the other day, you know, 25 years ago, what it meant to be a Democrat and what it meant to be a Republican,
right.
People knew what that definition was. 25 years ago, people knew what the definition of straight and gay was. There weren't all those other letters, but we've evolved those letters to include people who have like a different way of thinking or identified differently. But politically, we haven't identified anything other than black or white, and we aren't that anymore. We've
right.
evolved to a place of we have a new way of thinking. There should be a moderate middle where people feel, and I think most of the people we all align with feel more comfortable in saying this is how I believe. I'm not black or white in this issue anymore.
Yeah, well, and I said this last night at dinner. Democrat and Republican, local, state, federal are all different. They mean different. Like politically speaking, local, state, capital, Washington, D.C., Democrat or Republican mean very different things in all three of those locations. And that's a really interesting perspective that I keep in mind when I meet with political people. I meet them where they are.
Right.
And try to understand what their agenda is. And again, there are bad apples in politics. And normally I can call it out.
I mean, I have lots of friends on both sides. Some are a little more extreme on each side. You know, there's a few.
Yeah.
That are probably, it's a little uncomfortable for me. But if I ever have to give my view and I feel confined because of shame, then they're probably not a good friend.
Yeah, that's a good point. And frankly, I just want people to, I just think if people knew more about.
And politics is a blood sport.
Yeah. And I'm tired of people using important issues. You know,
Right.
At the end of the day, the most important thing that we all need in this country is economic stability, financial stability, access, opportunity to make a living, build a family. Like the really important things that we all need is housing, water, food.
Right.
You know, that's the most important thing to me. And I do get tired that both parties leverage these hot issues to divide us and distract us from these other really important issues like housing, water, food, you know,
Right.
access. Like that's the thing that bothers me the most. And I even see people on both sides that get too wrapped into
Trafficking, fentanyl.
right. We've got a lot of issues.
Well, and, you know, I saw something the other day on the news, and that's one of the things that, you know, we talk about all the time is now with social media, something that happens today is global access. Whereas something that happened 30 years ago, you might not find out about it for 3, 4,
Right.
or 5 weeks, maybe even a couple months.
Good
And
point.
so now the fact that we all have immediate
It's instant.
access, but we take that immediate access of whatever we hear as truth. And we have to stop doing that because politically, our news sources, they are swayed, they are skewed, there's not a lot of facts that go behind the media that we're consuming. And if we don't, you know, like Donald Trump saying that, you know, these Haitian people were eating the dogs and cats. Look how quickly that became like this massive social media undertaking and people were getting millions of hits on these shorts. But, you know, I feel like the three of us and like looking at issues as a whole and saying, how can we position ourselves to educate people, bring communities together and start talking about the things like you said, that are the real issues that need the impact, and imploring the people of those communities to take action. Because to your point, once you get to a higher level of government and politics, they're not concerned about Louisville, Kentucky, you know? So the people of Louisville, Kentucky have to take action.
So happy you said that because I get frustrated. Even in this presidential election, Kentucky, you know, I do think that should be looked at in terms of states and population. And, you know, these elections are getting way out of hand, billions of the money, you know, I think we need to really take a look in the mirror and understand what our country is and what it's not. You know, we pride ourselves on being, or we should pride ourselves in being one of the best countries in the world, but we've got a lot of issues we're not facing.
Right.
And what is it about our country that it's okay to have someone in the high office that says things like that, rhetoric,
Right.
and tweeting, I hate Taylor Swift. Dude, you are running to be president of the United States. Like, you've got to set a moral, ethical authority. Like, what are we teaching our kids? Like,
And she's done a wonderful job of teaching her fan base how to be good people, right? So the people who fall in line with her, I feel like for the most part, if she said, I need you to pick up arms and do this, or go pick up trash on the side of the highway today, we'd all be driving down the highway. We'd see people taking public service action. So
And
she
she's writing a
has,
song about it.
so
well, Donald Trump is our version of Kim Jong Un. Like, he wants us to just, yes, what can I do for you, sir? Like, no, like,
But I don't understand how we got to this point.
yeah, well, I think probably Donald Trump ran initially thinking it was just going to be a build his brand,
a publicity stunt.
and then he won, and then learned that half this country, and this is what I always tell Democrats, because I'm a Kentucky Democrat, is we got to stop ignoring why people hate Democrats. Like, what is it about people that love Trump so much that they hate? I'm fascinated that there's so many people willing to vote for Trump than for Kamala, because even if people don't like Kamala, people like, again, all the reasons that people have, it's still mind-boggling to me that people still, he's our guy. He speaks for us. And I go home to Eastern Kentucky to check on my dad, and I run into people, and they all say those things to me, and they know I'm political. They know, and most people know they can talk to me about anything. Like, I'm not going to degrade anybody, or, and anybody who comes up to me back home and talks about Trump, like, obviously I have a conversation with them. I'm not saying you're a dumbass or,
Right.
That's just not who I am. I'm trying to understand the psychology. I'm trying to understand why this. I remember my grade school lunch lady came up to me, who also had a loved one where my dad is, and said, "You look familiar." He was like, you worked at the White House. And I was like, sure did. And then we started getting into politics, and she goes, I just have to tell you, Trump's our guy. He speaks for us. He's our guy. And never mind that, like, it's mind-boggling to me that I know where I came from. And, we had a very humble situation, and a lot in the neighborhood we grew up in, at my high school, humble. Like, nobody was like rolling in the dough. And I want to understand the psychology, because I don't understand even the way I grew up, where I got a formal education and now I've got a little bit of money and I'm wearing cute little loafers that look like they're really fancy, but they're really not. They're from Macy's. People look at me and think, oh, maybe sell out, or, oh, he's got his education, he's fancy now. And how do we change that? I fight every day for the everyday person in Kentucky. Like, my heart is in Appalachia. Like, I love how I grew up. I love my people.
And what is a moderate now?
Right. And I think I will say, to give some hope to this conversation, I think moderates are growing. Centrists are growing. I think independent thinking. I think people are figuring out that the way this system was designed is, don't think for yourself.
Right.
We'll think for you.
Right.
It's changing. Like, I hate to, I'm not disparaging church. God, don't cancel me. But again, if you really study it in the Falwells, because I am angry when it comes to the
We both have
Falwells.
our honorary deviled egg tray in the South.
I mean,
He
think
said,
about
"How
it.
were you raised?" I go, "With a deviled egg tray."
I mean, seriously, it's infuriating. My family, like the church I grew up in, idolized the Falwells
Right.
and made me think I was a bad
In
person.
the
Right.
80s, though.
And what,
televangelists.
right. And what's been the aftermath of all of
Right.
that?
And now he's having the pool boy and the sex scandals and the,
Right.
and I'm like,
But there's forgiveness.
right.
But think about how many people got backlash when they were trying to think for themselves, and they're like, I'm on the fence. I don't know about this. They were
Right.
probably ostracized and, highly
Right.
thought bad of
And
for just questioning the
What is
system.
JD, the big televangelist, the black guy, JD? It's like.
I know who you're talking
Did
about.
you all watch Honk for Jesus?
No.
Watch Honk for Jesus.
Wait, where is it?
It's so fun. Well, there's so many of these. When you said black preacher, that it's basically making fun of the, it's good. Honk for Jesus. Watch it. It's so
Okay.
funny. I won't give it away, but it's it's also like, the Tammy Faye. I mean, there's so
Mhm.
many that
I
like
watched
that
all
poke
those.
fun of like these evangelicals with their private planes and their lifestyles and, support Jesus. So
Right. Well, and I have a family member, and they have a son who has transitioned, and they were very, very active in their church. And, I was involved, and I went to church with them. And I just remember, watching, you have to tithe 10, 15% to your church. And I watched this family pray and go to church and subscribe to, Bible studies, all this stuff. Well, then later on, they had a son that decided to transition, and this family has done everything that they can to be accepting. But the church that they have sacrificed financially so much for years, I think essentially kind of like turned their back. And, now this family has a child but they love their child, and so they're doing what's best for their family. And it's not turning their back on somebody that they love. And, and I've watched them, sometimes they have had financial hardships, but you've tithed and you've tithed and you've tithed under that idea that the church and God is going to provide for you. And this is not a knock against religion, but it is a knock against forcing people to subscribe to this belief that it's this way or not at all. And now I'm
right.
having conversations with this family that, they're sad, they're lonely, they don't have that support that they used to have within the community because they chose to love their child.
Yeah, that's it. I agree. And that's what's so polarized. Again, you can compare it to politics sometimes, but the church has become this very polarizing. You're with me or you're against me, or you believe this, or you're going to hell. Are you doing? But who creates that? Like I always said, I see God in people. I see the devil in people.
Right. I've said this for years. My grandmother is the most. If she's not going to heaven,
right,
no one is.
Yeah, my grandmother. I saw God in my grandmother.
Exactly.
I saw God in my mother.
Right.
I've seen the devil in family members. So, I don't need an institution.
Right.
Some people do though, and I get that. Some people need that sense of hope and inspiration in the church. I get that.
And I say to Kristi all the time, love is an action. It's not a word. How are you showing up? How are you showing up for your friends, your family, your community, yourself? What are you doing when you go to bed every night? Are you doing something that you feel like, you can be proud of? And those are all questions. If you're not asking yourself on a daily basis, you need to start.
Yeah, because it breaks my heart to think, thinking back home, like I know who I am. I know where I came from. I know, like I say, I have
What's the population
of what?
where you grew up?
Oh, good question. It's not as small. I didn't grow up in like a Holler or anything, although I had family members that did, and like we frequented those areas. And
what is a Holler exactly?
It's just basically, a Holler is, a back road, lots of trees, and it kind of not a formal.
So they don't like call their neighbor, they holler?
That too. I think actually that might be some truth in that, actually. Just holler next door. But I guess my point is, no matter how educated I get, no matter how rich I become, no matter who I know or what circles I'm in, or I know who I am and where I'm from. And so it breaks my heart when I go home and people think that I don't have their best interests.
And the qualities that impress you in other people.
100%. I'm trying to better myself every day. I have my flaws, obviously. But just because when I go home, and just because somebody doesn't have a formal education, just because somebody doesn't have a lot of money, just because that doesn't make them less than. And that there's this psychology in our culture, in our society right now, that people feel like they're looked down upon. Like even me, coming from where I came from, and when I go home sometimes, I am made to feel like I'm somehow not one of them anymore.
Right.
And this is not true. It's not true. Like I'm a little gayer, flashier, and yeah, I've got a college degree, and
yeah, I might know some people that I could call that.
Right. I get around, but I went homecoming king.
Self-made people that are on the Forbes list, or just let's just say wildly successful. Forget about the Forbes list, but that have no college education.
Exactly, 100%. And those are the narrative that I'm constantly. But I feel like I feel like sometimes people constantly have to explain themselves to people who may not have that college degree. I'll tell you why I got a college degree. I didn't have any other option. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
And I think that you and I have kind of fallen in that same line where the people from back home look and say, oh, well, they're just trying to get ahead or whatever. And the people who are in the societies that we end up becoming a part of might think, oh, they're just trying to get ahead. We're just trying to figure out how do we bridge the divide that has become between those two social classes of people and help people realize that we're all the same.
Right.
We all deserve the same thing.
100%.
And we all deserve the same respect. And we're just trying to leverage the relationships that we have or the passion that we have into action that makes a difference for future generations.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you what keeps me up at night is, how can we increase the wallets of people? How can people be more financially secure? Access to healthcare. Healthcare system is so bad. I feel so sorry for poor people with health problems.
Right.
It is so bad. And I also think about like, how is it we live in a world, and this is going to be political, but I don't care. How is it we live in a world that an Amazon can make Jeff Bezos worth what he's worth without all of his employees at least being in middle class? Like, think about that.
Right.
Like, how do we let companies get so big to make a few people so insanely rich without making sure their employees are fairly compensated first?
Right.
That's a problem to me. I don't know if that's Republican or Democrat. You tell me. I don't know. Put me in a party. I don't know if that's a Democrat or Republican statement, but you tell me what it is. But I'm just a human being who's smart and educated that would like to know why these big companies can get by with that.
And I feel like you and I have really both seen that ultra hardworking lower class that bust their ass day in and day out. And there's people like that I'm convinced, don't work less hard than Jeff Bezos.
Right.
They don't.
They probably work 3 jobs.
Exactly.
And raise a family.
Exactly.
And
but they're
I
the
have a
ones
problem
that are
with that.
having to worry about, can I afford to pay for my kids' school lunch? Right?
100%. That's why like public education is really important to me.
What do you tell us about what you're working on right now?
So there's an amendment, and it's on the ballot in November in Kentucky to start allowing public funds to go to private schools. I'm not anti-private schools. I mean, that's the thing that people want to quickly just take you here and here. No, I'm not anti-private schools. I'm all for them. In fact, scholarships. Like, and if there's young, deserving people that feel like that, God, they really get them in that private school, let's figure it out. But don't tell me we're ready to start putting public funds into private schools. We're not fully funding public schools.
Right.
Public schools are a problem. Like, we've got to start improving our public school system. And this idea that some people make it and some people don't, that doesn't jive for me.
Right.
And,
the
free
next
lunches.
generation, you're going to have, like we talked about last night, that are socially inept.
Exactly.
Right. Because if that hypothetical baby JP and I had were to come into fruition, that child at this current stage in the game would be homeschooled.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about having kids a lot lately, as we've talked about, and maybe you will have my kids. And I do. I don't hesitate having kids because I want kids. I hesitate about these issues. Like,
right.
Oh God.
I can't prevent what's happening in the world. And I know the abundance of love that I would feel for that human being. And I already know what kind of a passion and force I have driving me for other people's children. And for a long part of my life, I thought that might hold me back. My own human might hold me back from being the most influential and impactful for everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
My dad used to say that a smart man or smart person, I guess, that when they do things, they try to figure out their actions, how they can affect 3 generations. He
Great
said
point.
A shallow person is figuring out what they're going to do for the weekend.
That's a great point.
I would have loved your daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, my generation should be learning from the older generation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This next up and coming generation they should be learning from my generation and your generation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of hotheads. There's a lot more learning that needs to be taking place, I think. But empathy is my favorite word, because that if you just believe in empathy, conversations about important topics that are hard to talk about become way easier. See the human side of these conversations.
Right.
Even if somebody really upsets you, think about what kind of pain that person has inside or experience.
Well, and don't ever think that that's not going to happen to you. Like, as soon as you're able to look at somebody else's situation and think, what if that were me? Or that could very well become me. What are you willing to do to take action to prevent it for somebody else, knowing that you might need to make a phone call later because it is you?
Yeah.
You know, I posted on social media a few days ago and I said, look, if you have kids, put air tags in their shoes. If you have kids, put air tags in your shoes. If you have kids, put air tags in their shoes. Like human trafficking, it is real, it is profound, and
So
it is
sad.
terrifying.
So
a couple days
depressing.
later, my tiny little hometown of New London, Iowa posted about a missing little girl. And she had been picked up and she had been taken to the town over. And the whole community freaked out because, oh my gosh, this has never happened here before. But that's how close it is.
Yeah, Kentucky today signed into law to ban conversion therapy. And it's fascinating to me that we even have to have a law banning it, because I view it as child abuse.
Right.
And
As do I.
It's amazing to me that we even have, that's even a debate.
If we're not allowing kids to drink before the age of 21, we're allowing them to genetically modify their hormonal.
I mean, having a conversation with a young person, like I would have loved to have lived in a household or a community where the moment I had thoughts about being gay, I could open and freely talk about it. But it was suppressed for years because I was scared to death. But a conversation with your parents or your guidance counselor, your teacher about what you're feeling is one thing. But having any adult make you feel like you need to change, convert, get the devil out of you, like whatever they call it, is crazy to me. Like, especially
all those tent revival people in the 80s that told you all going to damnation. Did we ever check in with those people? Did they go to damnation?
Well, but
surely they have to be a rubbernecking of the people getting into damnation by now.
to your point, JP, at 21, what you just said earlier, you know, you're a fat Republican and straight. You, at that point in your life, that's what you said.
Yeah.
But at that point in your life, think about if 5 years before that, you had said, I want to be a girl.
Right.
Think about who you've become since 21 that has a completely different set of working knowledge about who you are as a human being that you didn't have at 15, that these children don't have. And we're expecting them to make lifelong, massive body ramification decisions before they're fully developed.
Well, the sad part of this discussion is people would view that and look at me and, you know, I view it as leaning in, learning, growing, evolving. The other side would view that as liberal arts education. I've been liberalized. I've been, you know, that's the mindset that people, that I've been indoctrinated to be that way.
So with that being said, say goodnight, Lucy.
Good night, Lucy.
Good night, Lucy.